They said my jacket didn't belong in the same frame as this house, then tossed it in the trash. My sister laughed. Too tacky. I picked it up from between the champagne bottles and cigarette ash, brushed off the wine stains, and made a vow if they only lived for appearances, I'd strip those appearances bare right where they loved being applauded most. The velvet collar still smelled like my grandmother's lavender sachets, even through the garbage stench. My name is Harper Lane, and I arrived at the rented estate 45 minutes late, still wearing work clothes beneath my grandmother's vintage velvet jacket. The valet's eyes flickered over my Honda Civic wedged between the Teslas and Mercedes, his gloved hand hesitant before taking my keys. The Willowbrook Manor sparkled against Cleveland's October drizzle, every window blazing gold. Inside, my family's charity gala was already in full swing, crystal glasses catching light, laughter sharp as ice-breaking. The Lane Foundation had just hit its $5 million milestone, and my parents had transformed someone else's mansion into their temporary kingdom for the night. I spotted them immediately. Richard Lane, my father, stood near the marble fireplace in his $3,000 suit, discussing tax loopholes with a federal judge. My mother, Valerie, held court by the champagne fountain, her committee ladies hanging on every word about the spring auction. Sloane, my sister, worked the room in her Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress, her PR smile never wavering as she live-streamed for Prism and Peak's social media. Cole, my brother, had cornered some crypto entrepreneur near the bar, probably pitching his latest fund. The smell hit me first, that particular blend of expensive perfume, catered lamb, and fresh flowers that meant money. Real money. The kind that never worried about rent or supplier invoices or whether the ancient sewing machines would last another month. Harper. My mother's voice cut through the jazz quartet. Finally! The room didn't stop, but it stuttered. Conversations continued at lower volumes, eyes sliding toward me like I was a curiosity the Lane who ran a thrift shop. Basically, Valerie's smile stayed perfect, but her fingers tightened on her champagne flute as she assessed my appearance, the jacket, the dark jeans I hadn't had time to change, the boots still dusty from the workshop floor. We held cocktail hour an extra 20 minutes, she said, loud enough for the nearest cluster of donors to hear. Though I suppose your clients keep different hours. I was finishing a commission, I said. A wedding dress reconstruction for How Crafty. Sloane materialized beside me, phone still recording. Everyone, this is my sister Harper. She does alterations. She pronounced it like a disease. Then her eyes landed on my jacket, and her laugh burst out, bright and cruel. Oh my God, Harper, not stylish, like, at all. The room tilted toward us now, drawn by blood in the water. My father abandoned his judge, striding over with that courtroom walk that meant control. He didn't speak to me, just made eye contact with one of the catering staff and nodded toward my jacket. We should store that, he said smoothly. The help can find somewhere appropriate. The help. The 20-something server looked mortified as he approached, tray balanced in one hand, but it was my mother who delivered the final blow. She plucked the jacket off my shoulders herself, holding it between two fingers like something contaminated, and dropped it into the trash bin beside the bar, right between the cocktail napkins and champagne corks. Much better, she announced. Now you look almost presentable. Sloane's camera caught everything. Family moments, she captioned for her 40,000 followers. When your sister finally shows up wearing Grandma's moldy vintage, the heart reactions flooded in immediately. I stood there in my plain black sweater, feeling the absence of the jacket like missing skin. Around us, the gala guests pretended not to watch while watching everything. This was better than champagne to them, the Lane family's black sheep being sheared in real time. I should go, I said quietly. Don't be dramatic. Cole had joined us, bourbon in hand. Have a drink. Pretend you belong here for once. But I was already walking toward the trash bin. My hands shook as I pulled the jacket out, wine staining the left sleeve now, cigarette ash in the velvet folds. Something ripped as I lifted the silk lining near the collar, exposing a flash of older fabric beneath. "I'm keeping this," I said to no one, to everyone. My mother's sigh could have frosted glass. "This is exactly why we can't feature you in the Foundation's materials. Harper, you insist on being difficult." I left through the kitchen, past the caterers who avoided eye contact, out into the October rain. In my car, I laid the jacket across the passenger seat and noticed the tear had revealed something else, an old label, hand-stitched, with writing too faded to read in the dark. My phone buzzed. Sloane had tagged me in her story. The video already had 300 views. In the comments, strangers laughed about the poor relation and vintage fail and some people trying too hard. I sat there in the parking lot, rain drumming on the windshield, and made my decision. If they wanted to throw away their history, their connections to anything real, that was their choice. But they'd thrown away the wrong jacket. And soon. They'd learn exactly what that meant. Growing up in the Lane household meant memorizing the metrics of success before you could spell them. Dinner conversations were performance reviews, SAT scores, internship offers, networking contacts acquired at weekend galas. My mother kept actual spreadsheets of our accomplishments, color-coded by child. Mine had gone mostly gray by sophomore year of high school. The only soft thing in that house was my grandmother Maeve, who lived in the basement apartment after Grandpa died. While my siblings collected trophies and my parents collected connections, I collected hours beside her ancient Singer sewing machine, the motor humming like a cat's purr. She taught me that cloth had memory, that every stitch told a story, that mending something broken could make it stronger than new. "Your parents think money is security," she'd say, guiding my hands over a torn seam. "But knowing how to make something from nothing, that's real power." She died my senior year of college. At the funeral, my mother donated all of Maeve's handmade clothes to Goodwill without asking anyone. "Hoarding old fabric isn't healthy," she'd said. I rescued what I could from the donation bags, including the velvet jacket. After graduation, while Sloane climbed the PR ladder and Cole conquered venture capital, I took a job at a tailor shop in Tremont. The owner, an Ethiopian immigrant named Samuel, taught me construction techniques from 3 continents. Customers were teachers needing hems, nurses wanting uniforms that actually fit, artists transforming thrift store finds, real people with real bodies and real budgets. The shop became my business school. I learned that a perfectly darned hole could save someone's interview suit, that a reconstructed vintage dress could make a bride cry happy tears, that clothes weren't just fabric, they were armor, memory, identity. When Samuel retired, I used my entire savings, the college fund remnants my parents hadn't clawed back when I majored in textile arts instead of economics, to rent a warehouse space in Ohio City. Threaded Harbor was born in that drafty building, between the brewery and the demolished steel mill. I scavenged industrial sewing machines from closing factories, built cutting tables from reclaimed doors, created a business from Cleveland's discarded pieces. My first year, I made $11,000. I ate ramen, slept on a cot in the back room, and washed my hair in the workshop sink. But elderly women brought me their mothers' wedding dresses to preserve. Young professionals paid me to transform their parents' outdated suits into contemporary statements. I wasn't just hemming pants, I was holding stories, continuing conversations between generations. The workshop grew. I hired 2 part-timers, Marcus, a design student from CIA, and Ruth, a retired seamstress from the garment district's golden days. We ran community mending circles on Saturdays, teaching people to fix instead of throw away. The local sustainability newsletter featured us, small victories that never made it to my mother's spreadsheet. My family's response was predictable. They'd mention my hobby job at parties like discussing someone's embarrassing medical condition. When Vogue featured upcycling as fashion's future, Sloane texted, "Cute trend. Too bad you're not in New York where it matters." The breaking point came 3 years ago. Threaded Harbor's grand reopening in a bigger space I'd saved for 2 years for the deposit, built the fitting rooms myself, created an actual showroom. The same night, Sloane won PR Professional of the Year. My parents chose her ceremony. Cole sent a congratulations text at 11:47 p.m. Nobody came. I stood in my empty workshop that night, surrounded by mannequins wearing my reconstructions, and understood. To them, I wasn't unsuccessful, I was invisible. Worse, I was proof that Elaine could choose meaning over money, and that terrified them more than failure. But the Tremont community came. The barista from down the street, the vintage shop owner, my landlord's daughter who'd worn my designs to prom. They drank cheap wine from coffee cups and toasted to keeping craftsmanship alive in a city built by hands like ours. That's when I stopped trying to earn my family's approval. I focused on the workshop, on clients who saw value in restoration, on building something that couldn't be measured in their metrics. Revenue grew slowly but steadily enough to pay real wages, upgrade equipment, even start a small emergency fund. Still, their dismissal stung. Every family newsletter that mentioned Sloane's campaigns and Cole's acquisitions but forgot Threaded Harbor existed. Every introduction where I was our other daughter, she does crafts. Every suggestion that I was wasting my potential, playing dress-up while they built empires. The jacket incident at the gala wasn't new. It was just the first time they'd thrown away something I loved in front of an audience. But sitting in my car that night, examining the torn lining, I realized they'd finally given me something valuable, a reason to stop pretending we were family in any way that mattered. The intervention came exactly 1 week after the gala, orchestrated with the precision of a hostile takeover. I arrived at my parents' house for what I thought was Sunday brunch, finding instead a corporate presentation setup in the kitchen laptop, projector, and printed agendas at each place setting. Cole had prepared a financial analysis of Threaded Harbor, complete with graphs showing my underperformance relative to market potential. Sloane's slides featured competitor comparisons, highlighting boutique resale shops in New York that sold to celebrities. My father had already drafted a lease reassignment for my warehouse space, the signature lines highlighted in yellow. "We've been patient," my mother began. "Pouring coffee like this was any normal family meal. But watching you struggle with that workshop while refusing help, it's painful." "Harper." "I'm not struggling," I said. "Last quarter was our best $17,000 in revenue." Cole clicked to his next slide. "That's not a business. Harper, that's a very expensive hobby. Your opportunity cost alone. Everything isn't about opportunity cost. Everything is about opportunity cost." My father's voice had that courtroom finality. "You're 34, no real assets, no retirement fund. Renting that disaster of an apartment above the Chinese restaurant? It's a Vietnamese restaurant. The point stands." He pushed the lease document toward me. "Marty Fitzgerald wants your warehouse space for his brewery expansion. He'll pay triple what you're paying now. That profit could fund your actual education." Sloane opened her laptop, spinning it toward me. "Everdeen School of Management has rolling admissions. I've already spoken to the dean. He remembers you from high school. Says you had potential. 2 years. MBA. Then you could join me at Prism and Peak. Real marketing, not whatever you call your Instagram posts." They'd planned everything. Application filled out. Recommendation letters drafted for my signature. Even a suggested thesis topic, transforming artisan crafts into scalable luxury brands. "We'll cover tuition," my mother added. "Consider it an investment." "In what?" I asked. "Making me more like you." The silence crystallized. Cole cleared his throat, pulling up another spreadsheet. "Look at the 5-year projection if you stay on this path. You'll never own property. Never retire. Never embarrass you at galas." My mother's coffee cup clicked against the saucer. "This isn't about us. We're trying to save you from yourself." "The family won't enable this anymore," my father said. "No more emergency loans. I haven't asked for money in 3 years. No more using the family name for your business. I don't. It's called Threaded Harbor, not Lane Designs. And no more pretending this is sustainable." He stood, full height, the way he did in court when delivering closing arguments. "You have 2 weeks to accept our offer. Tuition, living expenses, and a signing bonus to close the workshop properly. Or you're on your own. Completely." Sloane's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, smiled. Oh, did I mention the Greater Cleveland Young Professionals featured my sustainable fashion initiative this month? We're donating clothes to disadvantaged youth. Real impact. Harper. Not playing dress up with garbage. I looked at them. This family that shared my DNA but nothing else. My mother already mentally redecorating my life. Cole calculating my worth in cells. Sloane imagining me as her assistant. Fetching coffee while she took credit for my ideas. My father certain he could litigate me into compliance. I need to think, I said. They relaxed. In their world, needing to think meant yes. I drove back to the workshop, let myself in through the loading dock. Ruth had left a note about finishing the Henderson wedding dress. Marcus had reorganized the vintage section by decade. Everything smelled like cotton and old wood and possibility. The jacket hung on my workstation mannequin, the tear still revealing that mysterious label. I sat at my sewing table, turned on Maeve's Old Singer for comfort, and carefully opened the lining further. That's when I found it not just a label, but a folded piece of tissue paper, yellow with age, tucked into the shoulder padding. My hands shook as I unfolded it. A note, handwritten in fountain pen. Sample number 3, M.R. Collection, Spring 1978. For review only, not for production. Return to studio after showing. M.R. The initials meant nothing to me then. But the construction details I could now see in the exposed seams, French interior finishing, hand-rolled edges, silk thread that cost more per yard than most people spent on entire garments. This wasn't just vintage. This was couture, museum-quality couture. My phone rang. My mother. "Have you decided?" she asked without preamble. "I need the full 2 weeks. Don't be stubborn, Harper. This is your chance to matter." I hung up, staring at the jacket. They thought I played with garbage, that I couldn't tell treasure from trash. They'd thrown away something irreplaceable because it didn't match their aesthetic. I pulled out my laptop, started searching vintage fashion archives. 1978 American designers, initials M.R. It took 3 hours before I found her Marla Roan, the ghost of American fashion, whose workshop burned down before her first official show, destroying all but a handful of pieces now in private collections and museums. My grandmother had worked for a garment contractor in 1978, the same year Marla Roan's workshop burned, the same year someone saved one sample from becoming ash. I looked at the jacket, our jacket, Maeve's and mine, and felt the plan forming. They wanted me to matter. They wanted scalable impact. I'd give them exactly that, right in front of everyone who mattered to them. The restoration took 3 days of surgical precision. I worked alone after closing, using techniques Samuel had taught me for museum conservation. Each stitch had to be documented, photographed, preserved. The lining came away like old skin, revealing the jacket's true construction, a masterpiece of American tailoring hidden under decades of careful wear. Between the shoulder pad and shell, I found more evidence, a swatch of the original fabric before dyeing, a pattern maker's note in pencil, and pressed into the velvet collar, the faint impression of a stamp, Mr. Studios, sample room. My grandmother had hidden a piece of fashion history in plain sight, worn it to PTA meetings and grocery stores, kept it alive through ordinary use. I contacted Curate Authentica first, a certification service that specialized in vintage authentication. The owner, Diana Morse, had authenticated pieces for the Met Costume Institute. Her initial response was skeptical. Marla Roan pieces surfaced maybe once a decade, usually in estate sales of former models or fashion editors. "Send me detailed photos," she emailed. "Close-ups of seaming, button attachment, any labels or markings. If this is real, it's significant." I spent 6 hours photographing, my macro lens catching details invisible to naked eye, the direction of hand stitching, the pattern of wear on silk threads, the particular way Roan was known to finish her French seams. I included the tissue paper note, the pattern maker's marking, everything. Diana called at 11:15 p.m., voice electric. Where did you get this?" It was my grandmother's. "Harper, if this authenticates, it's not just a Roan piece. It's a prototype from the lost collection, the one that burned. These are mythical in fashion history. We thought they were all destroyed. My next call was to Jonathan Beck, fashion critic for the Cleveland Herald, who'd written extensively about Ohio's forgotten role in American garment manufacturing. He agreed to meet me at the workshop the next morning. He arrived skeptical, left converted. "Your grandmother was Maeve Harper?" he asked, studying the jacket through a magnifying glass. "Maeve Lane. Harper's my first name. I interviewed her once, 15 years ago, for a piece on the garment district. She worked for Steinberg Contractors. They did piecework for independent designers, including, briefly, Marla Roan." The connection clicked. So, when the workshop burned, the samples at Contractors for Construction Review would have survived. "Your grandmother probably saved this when Steinberg closed. Kept it as a memento." He touched the velvet carefully. "Do you understand what you have here? This isn't just vintage. It's a missing piece of American fashion history. The Roan prototypes influenced everything Calvin Klein, Donna Karan, even contemporary minimalism. What's it worth?" He laughed. "At auction with proper authentication, 6 figures, minimum, to the right museum or collector, possibly more. But Harper," he met my eyes, "the story is worth more than the jacket. Ohio seamstress preserves fashion history. Granddaughter discovers it in the lining. That's front-page material. I thought of my family's gala coming up, their perfect stage for displaying success. I need this authenticated officially, and I need it quiet until I decide what to do." Diana expedited the authentication, working with textile historians, comparing fabric samples to confirmed Roan pieces in museum collections. The report came back 2 weeks later, one day before my family's deadline. Authenticated Marla Roan prototype. Spring 1978 collection, unique piece, museum quality, extraordinary provenance. The certificate arrived by courier in a leather folder that looked more expensive than my monthly rent. Inside, along with the authentication, was a note from Diana. 3 museums have already inquired. Private collectors offering high 6 figures. This belongs in fashion history. That same morning, my mother texted, "Decision day, brunch at noon. Come prepared to be reasonable." I arrived at their house with the certificate in my bag, wearing the restored jacket. They didn't notice too focused on their final presentation, their last push to save me from myself. "We've increased the signing bonus," Cole announced. $50,000 to close the workshop without fuss. "And I've arranged an informational interview at Prism and Peak," Sloan added. "Tomorrow at 2. Wear something. Professional." I fingered the velvet collar, feeling the weight of hidden history. "I need more time." "No." My father's voice was granite. "Decide now, or we're done. No more family dinners, no more holidays, no more pretending you're part of this family's future." My mother nodded. "We've been more than patient, Harper, but watching you waste your life is cruel to us. Choose." I looked at them, these successful strangers who shared my name. They'd thrown this jacket in the trash, called it ugly, worthless, embarrassing, just like they'd thrown away Maeve's memory, my choices, anything that didn't match their vision of value. "I choose the workshop," I said quietly. The silence lasted 10 seconds. Then my mother stood, walked to the door, opened it. "Then go," she said, "and don't come back until you've grown up." I left without another word, the certificate burning in my bag, the plan crystallizing with each step. They wanted to erase me from their family story. Fine, but I'd write my own ending, using their own stage, their own audience. The Harbor Light Children's Fund Gala was 3 weeks away, time enough to prepare, to document, to invite the right witnesses. They thought they'd thrown away trash. Instead, they'd thrown away treasure. And at their precious gala, in front of everyone who mattered to them, I'd make sure the whole world knew exactly what kind of people threw history in the garbage. The rebrand started with a single Instagram post, the jacket on a mannequin, shot against exposed brick, captioned simply, "Some things are worth saving." Within hours, Jonathan Beck shared it with his 20,000 followers. Diana from Curate Authentica commented with a string of fire emojis. The Cleveland fashion community took notice. I'd spent years building Threaded Harbor quietly, serving individual clients, never seeking spotlight. Now I flipped the script. Every piece in the workshop became part of a larger narrative resurrection. Craft. The hands that built Cleveland now rebuilding its discarded beauty. Marcus designed a new logo overnight, a needle threading through waves. Industrial meets elegant. Ruth worked her contacts from the old garment district, bringing in 3 more seamstresses who remembered when Cleveland dressed America. We weren't just a workshop anymore. We were a movement. The collaboration with Docklight Coffee came first. The owner, Terry, had been buying reconstruction pieces from me for 2 years. She offered her entire back wall for a month-long installation, The Threads That Bind Cleveland's Fashion Heritage. We displayed 6 mannequins showing the evolution of a single garment from discarded to deconstructed to reborn. The centerpiece, a dress made entirely from vintage Browns jerseys, transformed into high fashion. Local press picked it up immediately. Upcycle revolution hits Ohio City. The coffee shop couldn't keep up with demand. Lines out the door of people wanting to see where trash became treasure. 3 boutiques in Tremont contacted me about collaboration. A sustainable fashion blogger with 500,000 followers flew in from Portland. Next came Lakeside Bike Shop. The owner, Mike, proposed something radical: fashion and function. A joint event where people could bring bikes for repair and clothes for mending. We set up on the sidewalk one Saturday, sewing machines next to bike stands, teaching people that fixing things was rebellion against disposable culture. A mother brought her daughter's torn communion dress. A grandfather carried his late wife's coat, wanting it fitted for his granddaughter. Stories poured out with every stitch. The local news crew that showed up for a fluff piece stayed 3 hours, the reporter crying on camera as Ruth repaired her mother's nursing uniform. The momentum built. Gallery Brickline reached out about Restitch Cleveland, an evening show combining fashion with performance art. Models would walk through the gallery wearing reconstructed pieces while video projections showed the original garments being transformed. Living documentation of resurrection. I saved the announcement about the Marla Roan jacket for opening night. The gallery was packed artists, journalists, the sustainable fashion community, even city council members talking about Cleveland's creative economy. But no one from my family. Their absence was its own presence. Halfway through the show, I took the microphone. Behind me, the projection showed close-ups of the jacket's construction, the authentication certificate, my grandmother's young face from her Steinberg contractor's ID card. This jacket was thrown in the trash last month, I said. Called ugly, worthless, embarrassing. But it's a Marla Roan prototype. One of perhaps 3 surviving pieces from fashion's lost collection. It survived because a seamstress named Maeve Lane, my grandmother, saved it, wore it, preserved it without knowing its value, just knowing it deserved to exist. The room erupted. Phones came out. Photos, posts, shares. Jonathan Beck was already typing his story. Diana started fielding calls from collectors. The sustainable fashion blogger live-streamed, reaching her audience in real time. "We're auctioning this piece at the Harbor Light Children's Fund Gala," I announced. "All proceeds to fund fashion education for Cleveland youth, because every piece of clothing has a story. Every hand that makes something matters. Every thread connects us." The reaction was immediate. My phone exploded with notifications, collectors inquiring, museums requesting viewings, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame wanting to discuss Ohio's fashion history, 3 documentary producers, the New York Times fashion desk, but also silence from my family, complete radio silence, until Sloan called at 1:43 a.m. "What are you doing?" Her voice was sharp, awake, angry. "Building something. You're using our gala to..." "What embarrass us?" "I'm donating to charity. Isn't that what the Harbor Light Fund is about? You weren't invited? I bought a table. Threaded Harbor is now a corporate sponsor. Check your paperwork." She hung up. The next morning, my mother's text was brief. Unacceptable. Withdraw immediately. I didn't respond. Instead, I posted a photo of Maeve at her sewing machine, the jacket visible in the background, barely in focus. The caption, "She taught me that making something beautiful from nothing was the only magic that mattered. 3 weeks until her jacket helps Cleveland's children dream bigger." The shares multiplied. Local news picked it up. Then regional. The story grew. Family seamstress preserves fashion history. Granddaughter discovers treasure. Announces charity auction. American dream meets American craft. 3 newspapers wanted exclusive access to the gala auction. 2 fashion historians requested permission to study the jacket beforehand. A Netflix documentary crew inquired about filming rights. My family had wanted me to matter, to have impact, to be scalable. Careful what you wish for. The Harbor Light Children's Fund Gala was my mother's crown jewel, 20 years of cultivation, connection, and careful social architecture. Every detail was orchestrated for maximum impact and minimum surprise. Until I arrived with my installation team at 3 p.m., while the regular vendors were setting up. "We're with Threaded Harbor," I told the event coordinator, showing our sponsor paperwork. "We'll need the northeast corner of the main ballroom for our sustainable fashion exhibition." The coordinator, a nervous woman named Patricia, kept glancing toward the executive offices. "Mrs. Lane didn't mention, check page 12 of your sponsor packet. Platinum level includes exhibition space." I smiled. "We're very excited to support the Children's Fund." Sloan arrived within 15 minutes, heels clicking across marble like warning shots. "What the hell are you doing? Setting up our exhibition. Didn't Mother tell you Threaded Harbor is a platinum sponsor now?" I directed Marcus and Ruth as they wheeled in mannequins. "The auction will happen during the main program. It's all been approved by the foundation board." "You can't just I can. $50,000 sponsorship buys quite a lot of access." I'd liquidated my entire emergency fund, sold my car, even borrowed against next year's income, all in for one night. Sloane's face cycled through emotions: fury, calculation, damage control. "Fine, but keep it subtle. This is Mother's event." "Of course," I said, as we mounted 6-foot LED panels that would display Cleveland's textile history. The setup took 4 hours. We created a museum-quality exhibition in the corner they'd assigned us, really. The corner they'd banished us to, far from the main stage. Perfect for my purposes. Let them think we were contained. The panels showed black and white photos of Cleveland's garment district in its heyday. Hands at sewing machines. Women like Maeve building America stitch by stitch. Mannequins wore my reconstructions: a gown made from decommissioned factory uniforms, a suit crafted from vintage Browns banners, a child's coat transformed from old restaurant tablecloths, and in the center, spotlit like the Mona Lisa, the jacket, the authentication certificate displayed beneath, Marla Roan's name in bold letters, the estimated value prominently shown: $200,000, $500,000. Enough to fund 10 years of fashion education programs. By 7 p.m., guests were arriving. Cleveland's elite in their designer gowns and bespoke suits, moving through the space my mother had choreographed. She held court near the main stage, pretending our corner didn't exist. My father worked the donor circle, back turned to our exhibition. Sloan live-streamed from everywhere except near us. But people noticed. How could they not? The LED panels drew eyes. The mannequins stood like sentinels, and the jacket, that ugly jacket, gleamed under museum lighting like captured fire. "Is that really a Marla Rowan?" A collector approached, champagne forgotten. "Authenticated last week," I said. "The only known surviving prototype from the lost collection." Word spread in whispers, then waves. Guests drifted to our corner, phones emerging. Photos snapped. The Cleveland Museum of Art's textile curator appeared, practically vibrating with excitement. 3 fashion bloggers huddled, plotting coverage. A reporter from the Plain Dealer started interviewing Ruth about her garment district memories. At 8:45, my mother appeared. "Remove it," she said quietly, smile never wavering for the crowd. "Remove what?" "All of it. This isn't what we agreed to." You didn't agree to anything. You threw me out. Remember, I'm here as a paying sponsor. Harper, I will not let you hijack. The auctioneer's voice boomed. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special addition to tonight's auction program. My mother froze. She hadn't approved any additions, but the foundation board had, after I'd shown them the authentication and explained the potential windfall for their programs. The auctioneer continued, a piece of fashion history, donated by Threaded Harbor, with deep connections to Cleveland's manufacturing heritage. Guests were already moving toward the main stage, where two volunteers wheeled out the jacket on its mannequin. The LED panels throughout the ballroom, Sloane's precious digital displays, suddenly switched to our content. Photos of Maeve, the garment district, the authentication certificate, the transformation of trash to treasure. My father stood near the bar, jaw clenched. Cole had stopped mid-pitch to a potential investor. Sloane's live stream captured her own shocked face before she killed the feed. The bidding will start at $50,000, the auctioneer announced, for a authenticated Marla Rowan prototype, one of only 3 believed to exist, with proceeds funding fashion education for underserved Cleveland youth. Do I hear 50? 3 paddles shot up immediately. I moved to the corner where I'd stationed Jonathan Beck and Diana from Curate Authentica. The cameras were rolling. The story was writing itself. 75,000, the auctioneer called. Do I hear 100? My mother found me in the crowd. You planned this, she hissed. You threw it in the trash, I replied. Called it garbage. In front of everyone. 100,000. Do I hear 125? The room was electric now. This wasn't just charity, it was competition. Who would own the piece fashion history forgot? Who would claim the jacket nobody wanted? 150,000. Sloane appeared at my other side. You're destroying everything we built. No, I said, watching my grandmother's face on the LED screens. I'm building something new from something you threw away. Isn't that what I do? $200,000. The crowd gasped. Cameras flashed. My family stood frozen, watching their carefully controlled narrative spiral into my story. The story of hands that make, not just money that takes. The story of preserving, not discarding. The story of a granddaughter who learned that everything, even revenge, could be reconstructed into something beautiful. The ballroom lights had been calibrated for flattery, washing everyone in gold, but under our exhibition spotlights, the jacket blazed with its own truth, every stitch visible, every fold catching light like liquid fire. The mannequin stood center stage now, and I'd positioned myself where I could see both the jacket and my parents' faces in the same frame. The auctioneer held the moment, letting anticipation build. Behind him, the LED walls cycled through our prepared content, but Sloane hadn't seen everything we'd loaded. Neither had my parents. The first surprise appeared now, a grainy photo from 1978, my grandmother Maeve at her Steinberg contractor station, young and focused, hands guiding fabric through an industrial machine. The timestamp in the corner 3 weeks before Marla Rowan's studio burned. Ladies and gentlemen, the auctioneer continued, this piece represents more than fashion history. It represents Cleveland's forgotten role in American couture. The hands that built this city also dressed it. A new image filled the screens. The original pattern notes we'd found pressed between the lining and shell. Then Diana's authentication certificate. Each detail magnified. The estimated value updated, based on the current bidding $200,000 and climbing. My mother's event coordinator was frantically typing on her tablet, trying to regain control of the displays. Sloane stood frozen by the tech booth, realizing too late that Marcus, my gentle, brilliant Marcus, had uploaded our content with administrator access he'd gained as an official sponsor. 225,000, called a woman in vintage Chanel. I recognized her Vivian Cross, pharmaceutical heiress, known for her fashion archive. 250,000, this from Robert Huang, the tech entrepreneur who'd started collecting Americana after his IPO. The screens shifted again. Now they showed security footage from the donor gala 3 weeks ago. Someone had leaked it to Jonathan Beck, who'd shared it with me. There I was, arriving late, still dusty from work. There was my mother's face, that perfect mask of displeasure, my father's subtle gesture to the server, and then the moment. The jacket being lifted from my shoulders, held with 2 fingers like contamination, dropped into the trash. Sloane's laugh, bright and cruel, perfectly captured by her own livestream audio, not stylish. The ballroom went silent except for the hum of air conditioning. I stepped forward, not to the stage, but to the space beneath the main screen, where everyone could see me. 3 weeks ago, I said, my voice carrying in the sudden quiet. This jacket was thrown away, called ugly, embarrassing, not worthy of being in the same frame as this family's success. I gestured to the screen, where the video loop showed the jacket falling between wine bottles and cocktail napkins. But sometimes what gets thrown away is exactly what's worth saving. The next image appeared Maeve in her 80s, teaching me to sew in the basement apartment, the same jacket visible on a hook behind us, faded but cared for, waiting. My grandmother, Maeve Lane, worked 60-hour weeks for 40 years. Her hands helped build the foundation of American fashion, one seam at a time. She saved this piece when Marla Roan's studio burned, not knowing its value, just knowing it deserved to survive. She wore it to grocery stores, parent-teacher conferences, church, kept it alive through ordinary use. $300,000. Vivian Cross again, standing now. I continued, my voice steady. When she died, most of her belongings were donated without asking anyone, discarded, like her work never mattered. But she'd already taught me the only lesson I needed, that making something with your hands is the only magic that matters, that preserving beats disposing, that everything can be reconstructed. The screens now showed Threaded Harbor, my workshop, my community, the faces of everyone who'd sat at our mending circles, learning to fix instead of throw away. 350,000 Robert Huang, not to be outdone. My father started moving toward the stage, his lawyer walk, ready to take control. But the foundation board president, Mrs. Ashford, stepped into his path. She'd been friends with my grandmother, though my parents never knew that. She'd been waiting for this moment as long as I had. This jacket isn't just fashion history, I said. It's proof that what matters isn't always what's valuable to the market. Sometimes it's valuable because someone loved it enough to save it. Someone wore it, mended it, passed it on. Someone refused to let it become trash. 400,000. A new voice, the Cleveland Museum director herself. Sloane had her phone out, trying to stream damage control. But the story was already beyond containment. The hashtags were trending. Trash to treasure. Marla Roan found, Bus, Cleveland fashion. Threaded Harbor. My mother stood perfectly still, her gala smile finally cracking. She understood now this wasn't just about a jacket. This was about everything they'd thrown away. My career, my choices, my grandmother's legacy, me. 450,000. The auctioneer looked to me. I nodded. 450,000 going once, going twice. $500,000. The voice came from the back. Gregory Roan, Marla's nephew, executor of her estate, who'd flown in from New York that morning after Jonathan Beck called him. The room erupted. Cameras flashed like lightning. The auctioneer's hammer came down with a crack that seemed to split the air. Sold $500,000 to Mr. Gregory Roan. But Gregory was already walking toward me, not the stage. He took the microphone from my hand, his voice carrying decades of waiting. This jacket belongs in the Marla Roan archive, he said, where it will anchor an exhibition about the untold women who built American fashion, the seamstresses, the pattern makers, the grandmothers who preserved beauty in their closets without knowing they were saving history. He turned to my parents, who stood exposed under the lights they'd paid for. Thank you, he said to them, for throwing this away publicly. Without that moment of dismissal, we might never have found it. Sometimes trash reveals exactly who we really are. The gavel's echo hung in the air like a held breath. $500,000. The number blazed on every screen, reflected in every champagne glass, burned into the perfect architecture of my mother's event. Gregory Roan walked to the stage, but not to claim the jacket. Instead, he turned to face the room, his presence commanding the kind of attention my parents had spent decades trying to buy. "The Marla Roan Foundation will match this donation," he announced. $1 million total to the Harbor Light Children's Fund, specifically earmarked for vocational fashion programs in Cleveland public schools. The ballroom erupted. Actual, spontaneous applause, not the polite golf claps my mother usually orchestrated. The foundation board members were on their feet. Mrs. Ashford was crying. The photographers couldn't shoot fast enough. I watched my family's faces in the chaos. My father's courtroom composure finally cracked, his jaw working like he was chewing glass. Cole stared at his phone, probably calculating how much publicity value had just been generated, publicity that had nothing to do with them. Sloane held her dead live stream phone, her PR smile fossilized into something brittle. But my mother, she stood perfectly still in her Carolina Herrera gown, watching the screens where Maeve's face still glowed. For one moment, I saw something flicker across her features. Recognition, regret. Then the mask reformed, and she was walking toward the exit with the kind of dignity that only comes from decades of practice. The Cleveland Museum director approached me, business card extended. "We'd like to discuss a retrospective. Threads of Labor, Cleveland's Fashion Legacy. Would Threaded Harbor consider being our primary partner?" Behind her, 3 more museum representatives waited. The documentary crew was setting up interviews. Jonathan Beck was already typing tomorrow's headline on his phone, showing it to me with a grin. "From Trash to Treasure, How One Granddaughter Reclaimed Her Family's Discarded History." "Harper." Sloane appeared at my elbow, voice low. "You've made your point." "Have I?" She looked at the celebrating crowd, the giant checks being written, our grandmother's young face still cycling on the screens. "You destroyed everything we built tonight." "No," I said. "I built something new, from something you threw away. That's what I do. Remember." She left without another word, following our parents' retreat. Cole had already disappeared, probably calculating how to spin this for his investors. Within minutes, the Lane family presence evaporated from their own gala, leaving only their names on the donor's wall, suddenly looking less like a monument and more like a tombstone. Ruth found me in the crowd, tears streaming down her weathered face. "Maeve would be so proud," she whispered, pulling me into a hug that smelled like lavender and industrial thread. "You brought her back into the light." Marcus was documenting everything, knowing we'd want to remember this. The community members who'd supported Threaded Harbor were here now. Terry from the coffee shop, Mike from the bike store, the gallery owners, the clients who'd become family, my chosen family, surrounding me in a circle of joy that had nothing to do with bloodlines and everything to do with believing in the beauty of mended things. Gregory Roan approached as the crowd finally thinned near midnight. "The jacket will tour 6 museums before its permanent installation," he said. "We'd like you to write the exhibition notes. The real story, your grandmother, the workshop, what it means to preserve something nobody else values." "Yes," I said immediately. He smiled. "Marla always said fashion wasn't about the clothes. It was about the hands that made them, the bodies that wore them, the stories they carried. Your grandmother understood that. So do you." The gala was winding down, but our exhibition still glowed in the corner. People lingered there, reading about Cleveland's garment workers, touching the reconstruction samples we'd displayed, taking photos with their children. 3 teenage girls stood mesmerized by the LED display showing sewing techniques, asking Ruth if she gave lessons. "We do," I told them. "Every Saturday at Threaded Harbor. Free." As the ballroom emptied, I stood alone with the jacket one last time. Tomorrow, it would begin its journey to proper preservation, to climate-controlled rooms and scholarly attention. But tonight, for these last minutes, it was still ours, Maeve's and mine. I touched the velvet collar where my grandmother's fingers had smoothed it countless times. She'd saved this without knowing what it was worth, just knowing it deserved to exist. She'd worn it through ordinary life, keeping history alive in grocery store aisles and church pews. She'd taught me that making something beautiful from nothing was the only magic that mattered. The lights dimmed as the venue staff began cleanup. In the morning, there would be consequences: family fallout, legal threats, the complete severing of ties that had already been cut. But there would also be museum meetings, student programs, a workshop with a waiting list, a community that saw value in preservation over disposal. I picked up my grandmother's photograph from the display, the one of her at her sewing machine, young and focused and building America one stitch at a time. "We did it, Grandma," I whispered. "We showed them that some things can't be thrown away. Some things come back, stronger at the seams." The jacket sold for $500,000 that night. But what I'd really done was priceless. I'd turned their stage into my workshop, their trash into my treasure, their dismissal into my greatest triumph. Some people inherit money. I inherited the knowledge that everything broken can be mended, that everything discarded has value, that the best revenge is reconstruction. The gavel had fallen, the price had been paid, and somewhere in the afterlife, Maeve Lane was definitely smiling. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please comment below and let's connect. If this story of reclaimed value and sweet revenge resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done with that jacket? Let me know in the comments.